So next we have country boy from Texas who likes to go hunting and fishing and has a pickup truck with no computers in it. Mike Childress, CTO for ETC. And he says that we're supposed to throw those eggs at Jeff on the way out the door.
Thank Jeff for doing a shameless plug for the emerging technology. That's because he co-opted me into it. So I want to have a dialogue today more about leadership. Everybody in here is either the leader of a person or you're the informal influencer of a person. And whether you build technology, integrate technology, or operate technology, it's a human endeavor at the end of the day. And so there's some principles that are long-lived that I've been taught, and I just thought I'd share those with you today. So if you get too focused on what's going on, you get zoomed way in on the problems and the things that are going on. And if you zoom out, you see broader patterns. And those broader patterns are about speed, change, and complexity. And they come at you in all different forms. And a lot of that speed, change, and complexity, quite honestly, has been driven by 50 years of innovation based on Moore's Law. More power, more computing power, everything else. It's driven pace and change. I mean, just look, 5 meg used to have to be loaded into the side of a plane. You put it on 2 terabytes on your fingertip now. That's a lot of change in a short period of time. And if you look, even change has changed. We used to have very cordial board meetings in the world, and you just like set a strategy, and then you would execute, and you'd measure. And the board meeting was about, hey, let's get together, and we'll have dinner and check some results. It's not like that anymore. It's a contact sport sometimes. And you know, you've got to have the ability to deal with the twists and the turns. You've got to sense and respond. And you've got to have that agility. And if you look over the long arc of history, not a lot happened until we had the Industrial Revolution. So we went from the agrarian society to the industrial, to the digital, to the giga, all driven by Moore's Law the last 50 years. And every now and then, you even get some events that slingshot you even further, whether it's a financial downturn in 2008, a pandemic in 2020. It just accelerates that much more the pace of change that's going on. And if you look, we used to have centuries, generations, decades to deal with change. It's hitting us now in months and weeks. And you've got to have the ability to deal with that. And if you're going to deal with that, you can't be rigid. You can't be so rigid you can't deal with these things. I mean, look at this quote. Customers could shop from their own homes. Their choices would appear at their doorstep, right? And they'd love it. I mean, you'd think, wow, that sounds like somebody we know. Well, that was Sears and Roebuck. And the year was 1893. They kind of had the right idea, but somewhere along the way, they grew so rigid, they couldn't adapt to what was going on in the marketplace. And, you know, quite honestly, there's a landscape of logos that were too rigid. Here's a few. If you're going to deal with that, you need to be agile, right? How do you renew, adapt, change? How do you deal with ambiguity? Because, you know, in the sense and respond world with all the changes, you're going to have to do something different. So this is my technical conference analogy of agility. We need to be like a non-Newtonian fluid, which acts primarily as a viscous fluid, displaying properties of an elastic solid. There's your tech conference explanation of why you have silly putty. So you need to be a little bit more like silly putty. If you hit it hard and fast, it firms up. If you stretch it, it's pliable. It'll do different things. It'll flow. It'll be fluid. Be a little bit more like silly putty. So there's a lot of companies that have exhibited that, where they've gone through this. Google, Netflix reinvented itself. Used to mail me DVDs and such, and now I'm streaming. I mean, I'll give Oracle credit. Oracle has gone through 3 re-innovations during their lifetime. SpaceX, one of my favorite ones, they're very happy when they blow something up on the pad because they learned something. So it's kind of fun to watch these different re-innovations. So let's talk about agility. There's actually 3 of them. You can have business agility, which is really kind of how do you respond to the market, how do you react, how do you renew. You got to have technical agility, right? How do you get things that are flexible, loosely coupled together? Things that, you can plan big but implement small in case there are changes. And then how do you have organizational agility? So what's the leadership, the structure, the culture, what's the workforce? How do you deal with these things? So the key point here being, you can't have one agility without the other two. It's going to limit you at some point. You may want to have all this business agility and adapt and adopt and react, but if you're technically poured into a set of concrete that won't let you, then you can't be agile. If your organizational constructs are poured in concrete and you can't adopt, then you're not going to be agile. It will always come back to get you. So you got to have all three working together. So let's zoom into organizational agility. And there's some threats out there for it right now, right? We got effectively 0% unemployment banging around. We can work from anywhere. I've got people competing with me for talent that you never would think they're half a world away, but you can work from anywhere. There's generational differences on how we work, how we talk, how we act. Technologies and work environments have changed, and there's societal influences. I mean, in the old days, you adopted to the culture of the company. That was it. When you come in the workforce in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, you came to the company. Well, now the company is very influenced by the people that it brings on and the culture they're bringing with them. And you got to be able to adapt to that. So here's just a peek, a window into this. So if you go out to a job board and you list all the jobs, the eyeball will rest for about 6 to 12 seconds on your job in a line of jobs. If your candidate clicks on your job, you will be lucky if they spend 27 seconds reading your job summary. If you're lucky enough that they want to apply for your job, if it's an hourly job, they will give you 10 minutes from the start to the stop before they lose interest in applying for your job. If it's a salary position, you get a whopping 16 minutes. All of that because of all the things above that are coming to bear on it. So you've got to be able to deal with these things. So let's go back to leadership culture, workforce, structure. I think it's best summarized in a book from General McChrystal, retired General McChrystal, Team of Teams, which is the world's faster paced, it's less predictable, it's more connected than ever, and it's gone from being complicated to complex. Because of all the interconnected and because of the pace, it is moving. Sorry about that, George. We have gone to complex. So what do you need to do? You need to be adaptable. You need some real-time information sharing. You need to adopt a concept of team of teams. We have got to move out of functional silos of work into teams of teams. So, kind of a graphic there. The old command and control structures don't really work in a modern work environment. You've got to do something different, or you're not going to attract the talent that you're trying to attract to get the job done. So in a team of teams, what are people looking for? A lot of people are looking for something that's bigger than them. They're looking for a mission. Can you articulate a mission? Can you have a line and coordinate metrics so you don't have two teams competing against each other? That is so frustrating to see sometimes. Do we have a shared mental model? Right? Shared mental models are a big idea. If you go back to some of the Peter Senge books on the fifth discipline and others, you've got to have a common mental model of how you're approaching things. Transparency, collaboration, everything expected. And then people want to know, what is my career path? What are you doing here? I will come give you some time. What are we doing together, though? How am I going to grow? And to do that, I'm going to take some of the stuff that Stephanie said, because this is an old Hay Group thing that I love, that I've adopted. You got to have the right size of workforce in the right shape of juniors to seniors. You got to commit to a university program. You got to have them in the right place, because work has moved to a lot of geographies. They've got to be at the right skills, and they got to be at the right cost. And so you got to get the rights right, because you really can't afford to get it wrong. And then kind of a final notion here is you need to realize each individual on your team and each candidate you're trying to attract, their work life is like a pie. It's got 3 wedges. And it's made up of the culture of the place. Is it fun to work? Is it too hard? Is it, do you give them time off to go watch the soccer game? I mean, what's the culture of the place? What's the content I'm going to work on? Is it interesting? Is it compelling? Is it something that I would like to learn? And then lastly is the compensation. All right, what's the total pay? What's the benefit package? And that notion of culture, content, and compensation, actually the size of the pie wedges changes as you move through your career. And you need to acknowledge that with all of your team members, and you need to try to find out where your candidates are coming from so that you can attract them. So, in summary, the world's been moving fast. You got to sense and respond. Be a little bit more like Silly Putty. There's 3 agilities, right? Business, technical, organizational. And then a modern workforce requires some modern concepts for you to help manage them. And I'd like to leave you with this one. It's one of my favorite ones. Never underestimate the importance of people. Thank you all so much.